right, guys, welcome to the Built by Vitality podcast. I am Steve Pinkerton. I'm sitting next to Philip Lewis, and we have a guest today, Lance Martin. Lance is going to be the resident sports nerd because when we came up with this topic I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about today, it's the college transfer rule. And I asked Philip about this, and mind you, this is the same guy that thought Paul George was a golfer. So we quickly had to go to the bullpen. And I think if I had to pick one person that has a vast knowledge of sports, it's Lance. So
I thought you were going to say me.
No.
Spend a lot of time on it.
No. So Lance is a member of the gym. I've known him for a couple years. He is extremely versed in all sports. So he's going to help us a little bit break down this college transfer rule. And why are we talking about the college transfer rule? I think it's important because this shows kind of the direction that we're going with our young people. And I think that there's some caution that we need to talk about when this is one of those steps in that direction. So before we get into it, I was going to have Philip talk about the transfer rule.
I'll let you start.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Lance, why don't you explain to somebody that doesn't have any idea what this is, what this changes, and what the new rules are?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing to look at is an evolution kind of over the years. So I think originally to transfer in D1 college athletics, they had kind of a fifth-year graduate transfer rule, right? That's when the transfers became very popular, and it was basically you earn your degree from the original university that you commit to. You've got the opportunity then to transfer without penalty to somewhere else that needs somebody to step up. And so I think that was a way to incentivize young people to get their college degree, potentially open the door to move up if you had a successful college career. And that's kind of how it all started, right? There wasn't a lot of gripe with that. It was pretty rare that you were able to graduate early. And if you were putting forth the effort and the commitment to get your education, which is you come there to do, and then opens up the door to transfer. You know, you saw some high-profile transfers from a quarterback standpoint. And that's really where it all started, right? And then in 2018, this idea of a transfer portal was created, basically in a really common way to say college free agency. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll talk about what's really changed this year that's gotten this to a completely new level. But in 2018, an individual would have to declare that they were going to the transfer portal, and then that would open up or reopen up their recruitment, just like it was in college, where colleges would be able to reach out and approach individuals currently at universities and potentially lure them in their sophomore, junior, and senior year to come to their school and fill a void. One of the things that really limited that in 2018 was this idea that you had to get a waiver. You had to get a waiver in order to compete year one. Otherwise, you had to sit out a calendar year, and then you'd be eligible to compete. And I think the waiver system, honestly, that's something that turned into big business too. There's quite a few prolific lawyers that specifically work with individuals to get waivers, whether it be hardship, getting back close to family, whether it be something that happened at the university. I know, being a big Dog fan, we've had a few of those waivers that would come up, and it's big business. And I think each individual conference, in addition to the waiver system, you could put in a conference ban, right? So the SEC could have you can't transfer within conference. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to leave Georgia, well, that's okay. You couldn't go to Alabama. Mm-hmm. This last year, as a result of the Ncaa, which is the governing body over college athletics, they instituted a new transfer rule that you get a one-time free pass. Regardless of the situation, you enter the transfer portal, you can transfer anybody, anywhere, play year one, no questions asked, which has opened it up drastically, and a lot of young folks are taking advantage of that.
I saw somewhere where they said right now, or as of 2 days ago, there were over 1,500 athletes and college basketball players on that transfer portal. That to me is incredible. Yeah. And my initial thought was, okay, I get it. You want to give the players some autonomy and some independence. I got it. But my reaction is, what happens if Lance is my coach? I'm a freshman. I'm still trying to figure out this program. Lance is hard on me, which anybody that's played college athletics or any athletics, you want to be hard on your players. You have to get that culture. You have to build that culture, to build the systems. And it's tough as a freshman or even as a sophomore. So as soon as it gets tough, what are we teaching these freshmen to do? Well, wait a second. Man, I had 3 other schools I was going to go to. I wonder, maybe I should go to one of these other schools. So as that immediate pushback is the coach is trying to get some buy-in. Instead, he finds himself losing players because these players, as soon as it gets a little bit challenging, as soon as they get yelled at, as soon as they make a mistake and they get corrected and they're held accountable, now they're going to jump ship and go somewhere else. That's where I see this trend is going to go. So how do you what's the argument against that?
Well, I think we've got to look at kind of why the transfer portal gained so much steam. And you mentioned hard coaching being one of it. I think one of the benefits of the transfer portal and one of the real advocates of the transfer portal is the fact that college coaching is turned into free agency, where you have less commitment there. So kind of playing devil's advocate, on the other side of things, you recruit me to a small university, you get a big-time job, move up. Now I'm stuck there with the people that I committed to are no longer there. How does that work for me?
Absolutely.
But I think to address your original point of experiencing the tough coaching and jumping ship elsewhere, of that 1,500, give or take, out of 5,000, D1 college basketball players, I think the really alarming number is how many people are in the transfer portal without a home. I mean, that's 15 people that are actively in the portal. You've heard about the big guys that have landed. We had the center from UNC that's landed somewhere. But those are a number of individuals that have declared that they're leaving their current home. They're looking for a new home, and they quite frankly haven't landed. Yeah. And I think that's where the concerning thing is, what happens when the grass isn't always greener, And learning to live with that decision that you make at 18 and the commitment that you make is something that's a bit of a challenge. But it's really something. And I think it's going to completely change the way that colleges have to recruit and have to engage with high school athletes,
I definitely think that there needed to be something that address that exact point of, if Coach Martin recruits me, I'm going there because of the coach, most likely. If he leaves, then maybe that's the stipulation where they allow all those players on that team to transfer with no penalty. But when you open this thing up, now you're going to have a bunch of people see their friends go and like, oh man, I get to go back into the recruiting process again. I get to go back through this, which I'm sure is I was not a highly recruited. I think I took a tour that was given by like a freshman in college that didn't even play basketball, gave me a tour. So there was no bells and whistles. No, my name wasn't up on the marquee when I walked in. But I would imagine some of these guys did get that, and they're sensing like, man, I kind of want to go back to that as a sophomore. They just had a tough season. I wonder if I can go and put my name back in the mix. And what you're saying is now, there's not enough spots to fill all these people. But I think another concern I would have, and I'm curious to get your thought on, is what is this going to do to seniors leaving high school when you can go get an already seasoned sophomore, junior, whatever, and they're probably going to be a better sign than some 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, it's not going to impact the elite. The elite in football terms, 5-star, 4-star athletes. It's not going to impact those guys because those guys are still they're going to be able to come in, compete as a freshman. But when you look at the 2-star, 3-star athletes, it's going to change the game. And I think those guys are going to find themselves falling into mid-majors. And honestly, if you look at the real loser out of this whole deal, it's the mid-major universities. Yeah. It's that coaching staff that goes and finds the diamond in the rough, develops a kid for 3 years, and then in arguably what could be his most impactful year, he makes a decision that's best for himself to go SEC, go ACC, because there's an immediate need. Just happened at Georgia. You can't fault that kid. I mean, if you look at just the raw data, you're going to position yourself better for the next level playing in the ACC, SEC. You look at some of the great NFL players that went to smaller schools, Khalil Mack as an example. He probably would have never stayed. He probably would have never stayed at a mid-major because he would have had the opportunity to transfer to a top-tier D1 program and play right away. So it's going to hurt that mid-major, and it's going to hurt that high school senior that might have been a kind of late scholarship guy to an SEC, ACC school, and now he's going to find himself at a mid-major kind of Southern Conference type place.
And then you look at it from a coaching perspective. I think of you're going to almost feel like a GM as a college coach because now you're going to have so much more on your plate to worry about than just your normal recruiting process. You're going to have all these other things that pop up. How much time does that take away from their ability to build their team and develop their guys?
Yeah, I think from a time standpoint, I mean, especially the top tier D1 programs, I know some folks involved in it, and they've built a small army of support assistants that are always recruiting, right?
Man.
Always recruiting. So the ones that have the money, they have that staff to constantly be watching film, constantly kind of have their ear to the door, so to speak, and figure out what's the next move. But what it changes for the head coach and the on-the-field staff is they never can stop recruiting.
Yeah.
They never stop recruiting. And what I mean by that, they're constantly recruiting the kid they're currently coaching because that kid could have an opportunity to make a move at year end. And it's unfortunate in a lot of ways because the investment there is going to get sacrificed to a degree. I mean, you look at what's happened with some of the prolific college football players who've stuck around and had their really shining star year in year 4. With this transfer rule, you're probably not going to see that.
Yeah. And you're going to see, I think that it's going to deteriorate the relationship between that coach and player because there's a difference between, I always loved seeing the kid that stayed 4 years and had that awesome relationship with that coach, that head coach or whoever it was. Maybe it was an OC, DC, whatever. You're not going to get that as much because I think whether it's subconscious or not, there's going to be a different relationship because now this coach is already in the back of his mind thinking, gosh, is this guy going to be around for 4 years? I can't spend that time worrying about it. I'm going to try and, focus on some other things where, as a freshman coming in, if Philip's my guy, man, I know I got him for 4 years. There's a big bond that's going to have to take place during that. And that I don't know if that trust factor is going to be developed as quickly or as efficiently as it was knowing you've got those 4 years. I think, and do you think it's going to change the way that coaches coach? Do you think it's going to change the way they interact with players? I
think they're going to have to. I think they're either going to have to adapt or they're going to get pushed out. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either, right? Because I think when you look at top tier recruiting, there's some that do it the right way. There's some that don't do it the right way. And I think the authenticity of how you recruit a kid now and the story that you tell him matters now more than ever, right? If you tell him that he's going to have the ability to come in and compete as a freshman, you better mean it, right? Yeah. He better get those meaningful snaps. He better have the opportunity to compete. If he doesn't, he's likely going to leave. And I think if you're upfront and honest, I think hopefully kids are committing to the process and it ultimately works out. But I don't think that's a bad thing with this transfer portal, right? Yeah. Because you look, and I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know enough, having been in it to a degree, to know that there's some coaches that are super upfront and honest when they go into a kid's living room. And then there's some that'll say whatever they can to get you on campus because they know once they got you on campus, you're locked in. Yeah. And I think you're going to have to live up to what you tell them. Ultimately, you would like to think that if you're living up to what you're telling them, they're going to return that and push back in the same way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Empty promises, it's easy to say whatever you want to get those kids on campus, and you wonder how many times that script has been flipped upside down once they get there. Is it automatically a different story as soon as they come on campus? Probably, I'm sure there's cases of that. But now I'm curious to see what coach will establish the culture of, hey, my guys are going to come here. I'm not going to have that many transfers, because the reality is you're going to probably be able to look at these top tier D1 schools and you're going to say, okay, this school has the highest transfer rate. There's got to be something behind that versus a school that has the fewest transfer rate. You know, I'm curious to see what that will hold and how that will almost become part of the recruiting process. Is, hey guys, look, people aren't leaving here; they're coming here and they're staying.
Yep.
And having that commitment and building a program. I think of, you know, there's some NCAA basketball teams that I would think of that off the top of my head that I feel like would be very good, like a Gonzaga program.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they just want to come play for Few the way that, is it Few, Mark Few?
Yep.
You know, he just seems like somebody that people want to come play for, and I think you're going to start to see those coaches, and maybe it's going to separate these coaches even more so to where now you're really going to have like a top tier group of coaches that, you know.
I think it will. And I think you've historically seen that a little bit in the past. And I think this year, obviously being the first year where there is no penalty to transfer, you're seeing some norms broke, right? I mean, and nobody used to transfer out of the University of North Carolina from a basketball standpoint. I think they've got 3 or 4 players in the portal this year. So all of that's rare. And I think we got to see how this is all going to shake out, right? I mean, if a whole bunch of people enter the transfer portal this year and you find a whole bunch of people not upgrading their situation or potentially not finding a home and a scholarship, you're likely not going to see the same result happening next year. But it comes down to the coach, and it comes down with those with high integrity. And, you know, the ones that are the best, they're going to continue to be the best. They're going to continue to adapt, and they're going to figure out a way to be successful with this. But I think the continuity amongst the team is going to be potentially the collateral damage. You know, I mean, I think about the buddies that I played with at Georgia in baseball, and like we still have 10 years later kind of done life together, right? Yeah. If there was a constant revolving door, that probably looks a lot differently.
Yeah. I also wonder, you know, I think about what happens to these kids now that are high schoolers. How do their principals, their upbringing now play into this? Because now I think they're going to be vetted a little bit differently for this recruitment process, because they need people that are going to take that commitment seriously and be a part of that program, and not use this as a, you know, are they going to use a mid-major as a jumping off point to a big D1 school? And like you said, I agree with you. I don't think it's a bad thing to have a kid that shines in a mid-major go and take that opportunity. It's just hard to draw the line of, you know, what does that commitment mean, and, you know, what becomes kind of acceptable, and when does it make sense to transfer?
Yeah.
And I think that those kids, the morals that they're going to have, and I'm just afraid with how these young kids are now. Communication is such a big problem for these young kids. I think that's going to be the driving force between these transfers. It's just going to be a miscommunication, and you know.
Yeah, and I think you can't fault the kids, right? I mean, ultimately, I think for mid-majors, they're going to have to recruit differently. They're going to have to recruit on a 2-year time frame, because if they get the rock star kid, they've got to understand that he's probably going to better himself and take an opportunity, not to position himself better for future success, but the experience is a lot different. I mean, if you're playing in the college football playoff or you're playing in March Madness every year, that's a lot different experience than playing in a mid-major. So that's going to happen. But I think you also, I mean, not to take this to a too serious note, but we got to look at the example that we're setting for these kids as a society, right? I mean, you look at marriage, which is going to be one of the most basic commitments. What, average of every marriage, 50% of them end in divorce?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a commitment. Well, that's the example that's being set. And you see it on TV, you see it in the movies, you see it in your everyday life. So it's just the idea that a commitment is as good as it's convenient for me, right? Yeah. And that's ultimately what you're at here. And I mean, it's on both sides of it, you know? I mean, kids commit to coaches, and coaches better themselves. And that was one of the main arguments of this thing is, is the student athlete being forgotten.
Yeah.
And now they've got a lot of control and a lot of power.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. And, you know, I think you're giving the power to these kids. You just hope that they are in a position to where they can leverage it the way that it's meant to be leveraged and not. But like you said, hey, when they're staring at hundreds of athletes in this portal that aren't getting picked up or not improving their situation, that word's going to spread pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's going to spread really quick. Do you think it's going to? Do you have a sport that you think it's going to affect more than the others?
I think right now basketball seems to be the main thing. And the only reason why I say that is because it's the easiest sport, in my opinion, to come in and play right away. You know, I think when you look at football, potentially even baseball, there's a bit more of a learning curve. You got to learn an offense. You got to learn a defense. You've got to kind of know the program, so to speak, whereas basketball, you can pretty much step in right away. And, I mean, that's certainly the one we're seeing the most impact of right now.
Yeah.
But I think next year will be the really kind of telltale on the football front.
I'm glad I didn't have to worry about that when I played basketball at Duke.
Yeah, you know, Phil's been a pretty big fountain of knowledge here on this episode, but he's got other skills.
I just played.
He's got a lot of skills.
Yeah.
You know, I think that it's the one thing that was interesting to me was how many coaches got interviewed about this, and there weren't that many players getting interviewed.
Yeah.
And it's just they need to interview some of these players because the coaches, of course, they don't like this rule.
Yep.
You know, of course, they're against it. But I think if you sprinkle in some of these top tier athletes, they would all say, "Hey, I think this is good for the sport, and it's going to hold coaches accountable, just like it's going to hold us accountable."
Yep.
But you know, you also have to be careful too. If you give a mouse a cookie, they're going to want some milk to go with it. They're going to want, you know, Phil to tuck him in at night. It's gonna move on. So you know, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But I thought this was a very cool topic. And to switch gears, those of you that don't know, Lance is a little bit of a golf addict, and I am very curious to know how you pulled this off. I see a picture of him at the Masters in one of those white caddy suits. And I'm like, how in the world is he walking the greens of Augusta? And then I realized it was Lance. Like, why am I surprised? Can you just briefly explain, A, how that came about, and B, what you were actually doing at the Masters?
Yeah, so I had a friend of my wife knew someone down in Augusta, and they were able to get me on the gallery committee. And basically the gallery committee is a support committee, full volunteer, a group of guys and ladies that come from all around the country to help put on what is, without a doubt, the best sporting event on the planet. I mean, you look at what they do in Augusta, it's kind of over and beyond anything I would imagine of a sporting event. But I was a four caddy, so I basically hung out on hole 14 all week and helped kind of navigate the crowd control, close off the fairways when needed, identifying spot balls, and kind of sat there right in the corner at 8-man corner for 7 days, and that was the office
for 7 days.
7 days. So that's the unique thing about Augusta National. There's probably not another place on the planet that can get thousands of volunteers to come out and dedicate 7 days to putting on a sporting event like such.
Now, the thing that I also found to be quite enjoyable was the payment for this was for 7 days. How long were your days?
10, 12-hour days,
Okay,
probably.
10 to 12-hour days. What was the payment that they provided these volunteers?
We get to play Augusta National in the month of May.
You can play as many times as you want.
One round of golf.
One round. One round. They get thousands of volunteers. Now, you've golfed all kinds of courses.
Yep.
What makes Augusta that? What makes it so different?
It's just special. I mean, it's perfect. There's not a blade of grass out of place. I mean, you've been watching the shots at Augusta National for years since you're growing up. I mean, golf folks that aren't golf fans, like, kind of breathtaking when you visit Augusta National. And I think just the prestige aspect of the place, you ain't getting on Augusta National many other ways, right?
This is a guy, Lance, just so people understand. I mean, he's obviously twice as large as Philip in real life, so he's not like some kind of golf nerd. This is also a guy that, would you say you go to 60 to 70% of Georgia football's home games?
Yeah. Yep.
So this is not someone that doesn't go to other sporting events, and you think that your time at Augusta, the Masters, is that special, even that you've had those experiences of college football?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. I've been to a national championship game. What they do down there is remarkable. For somebody that just appreciates people being great at what they do, there's no one better at putting on a sporting event than Augusta National.
That's crazy.
That's awesome. Super cool to be a part of it.
Philip and I were just talking, about how we can run an event, get some volunteers, and we can give them like a free workout.
Yeah.
They just have to spend 10 hours. They sleep here for like 6 or 7 days, and we'll give them a couple workouts, and maybe we can run it like the Masters.
It would work.
It's cool to hear someone that understands golf the way that Lance does talk about it, because we watch it on TV, and I mean, obviously it's a cool it's a cool venue, it's a cool event, but it's different when someone has the intimate connection with it like Lance. But
I like driving the golf cart.
Yeah, nah.
That's the best part.
Yeah. I don't think Philip would be allowed within 30 miles of Augusta when they play the Masters. What's the clubhouse like down there? I mean,
It's incredibly nice. Honestly, it's one of those things, you don't go in the clubhouse. Like, nobody goes in the clubhouse other than the members. So couldn't tell you what the inside of it looks like. My guess is first class all the way around.
How do you become a member of Augusta?
Great question.
Wow.
Who knows?
That's crazy. A guy like Lance, man. So if you're a member of Augusta National, you probably are doing something right.
I would agree.
I thought it'd be hard to get on like Gaston Country Club or something, Gastonia. I could imagine this one.
So I think what we do from here is we give it, maybe we give it the summer season. There was a clip. We're going to see if we can, I don't know how we can put it in here, but what also sparked this was I saw this, actually Lambert of all people, who I love Lambert, but he falls into that Philip category of sports. Yeah, he had this, it was the Colorado football coach from a couple years ago, and it was a press conference. He said, I got a letter from a player's mom, and she was upset, and he was very calm in talking about this. He's like, and the mom was upset that we weren't going to get 3 weeks off. The kids were going to get 2 weeks off before summer practice started. And he went on to explain this, and then all of a sudden completely switched and just went on this amazing rant of, this is Division I football. This is the Big 12. This is not intramurals. But that just shows, like, I cannot dream of my mom writing a letter to my college football coach and saying, hey, man, I was really hoping Steve could make it home for 3 weeks. I miss him. I can't even wrap my head around that. But that's the world that we're moving towards, where you've got these kids with helicopter parents that are just so overbearing. And what they're doing is they're handicapping these kids to not be able to make their own decisions and always need this approval or whatever. And that's what got me kind of down this rabbit hole of, man, this is kind of my fear with this program.
It's a bigger thing of the desire to control and the need for immediate gratification.
It's kind of like when the school bus driver used to drop me off at the top of the neighborhood, and I'd have to walk all the way to our house at the end of the neighborhood. When my grandma found out, she went up to the school and said, you need to take him all the way to the house without me or my mom knowing. And then finally she started taking me to the house. It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Explains a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Philip gets about 2 analogies a month that really just
That's right.
hit it home.
She just didn't write a letter. She went up there.
She went right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That explains a lot about you.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. So listen, I appreciate it, Lance. I think we'll revisit this when maybe summer ball is over and we get to see kind of where this process, because it's all speculation now. It's all, we can all make these grand guesses, but at the end of the day, it's going to be how does this really impact? And usually it's somewhere in the middle. It's not one of the extremes. It's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be terrible. It's going to be somewhere in the middle.
No, you hope it works out. I mean, you hope it works out for the players. You hope it works out for the coaches. And ultimately, you hope the fan wins out on it. And the last thing that you want to have happen is a kid to leave the home that they have, enter the transfer portal, and not find another home, right? Because, I mean, that's a big ask, right? So when you say, hey, coach, I'm entering the transfer portal, hard to go back on that, right? Hard to go back on that. Hard to look at your teammates in the eye and say, hey, I didn't find anything better, so I'm back.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how many of these 1,000-plus players in the basketball transfer portal don't find a home.
Yeah, and how many that do actually end up downgrading their situation versus, improving it. Well, if we do this again, maybe we'll put Philip in the driver's side of the golf cart. I'll be Lance's caddy, and we'll go golf.
We should do a little vlog. We'll go to a driving range or something. I'll show you.
I bet you Lance could smack it.
I don't know, man. I use all wrist. Yeah. That's it.
I would put 2 months of your salary that Lance outdrives you.
Just so I don't know if you know this or not. Me, Nate Agnew, and Spencer went. I did better than both of them.
Okay, well,
I was a little sore for like 3 days after because it's all upper half. There's no twist. There's no nothing. But I was cranking them out there.
Well, cool, man. Lance, thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely.
I appreciate
Thanks for having me on.
You got it.